Before the world knew peace, it knew terror. Before Olympus stood tall, the ground cracked with dread. Before gods reigned, there was chaos. This is the tale of Typhon, not a god, not a titan, but a force. A storm that walked, a scream made flesh. And though his name now whispers from the mouths of myth, there was a time when even Zeus feared it. Let us begin where all ends begin, at the edges of vengeance. Gaia, the earth, once bore the sky's weight with pride. But when her children, the mighty Titans, were cast down into the abyss of Tartarus, her grief twisted into rage. Her cries echoed deeper than the chasms of Hades, and the earth answered back with something darker than divine. From the boiling folds of the underworld, she summoned Tartarus himself, the pit incarnate. Their union was not one of love, but of purpose, of wrath and correction. Together, they birthed a creature not born but forged, not raised but unleashed. Typhon, he did not cry upon entering the world. He screamed, and the stars dimmed. His form was an insult to order. Hundreds of writhing serpents sprouted from his shoulders, each spewing fire and poison. His hands reached the horizon, fingers tipped with claws sharper than mortal steel. His legs were coils of thunderous snakes, slithering with the storm's hunger. His eyes, if they could be called such, were twin vortexes of hatred, burning brighter than volcanoes and colder than the moon's shadow. Winds bent to his voice. Mountains trembled at his gait. The sea recoiled from his presence. He was chaos in the shape of wrath, Gaia's answer to divine betrayal. And he would not kneel. When Typhon emerged from the chasm, he did not crawl. He rose. Each step fractured the land, shattered the clouds, and summoned tempests that howled for the blood of gods. The Olympians, basking in their recent victory over the Titans, laughed at stories of a monster stirring below. But it was not long before laughter turned to silence. From the island of Ischia to the peaks of Thrace, shepherds vanished in spirals of smoke. Thunder roared from clear skies. Forests wilted. And then, the wind stopped altogether. Zeus, king of gods, looked to the horizon and saw something that made his thunderbolt quiver in his grasp. Typhon. He did not speak, he commanded. He did not challenge, he attacked. Lightning struck first, and Typhon answered not with fire, but with fury. He caught bolts in his many hands and hurled them back, amplified. A whirlwind followed in his wake, blackening the heavens. The gods, once so mighty against the Titans, faltered. One by one, they fled, taking the forms of animals, hiding across lands and seas. Only Zeus remained, proud, reckless, unyielding. And so the skies themselves split open for the first true war of gods. A storm battled a storm. But even Olympus did not understand what Typhon truly was. He was not born to rule. He was born to undo, to unmake the structure the gods had built upon the bones of their forefathers, to strip away order, morality, even memory. And beneath his roars, beneath the shrieks of his serpents, there was something deeper. Pain. Typhon bore the ache of a mother's vengeance, a father's abyss, a world that had never been allowed to breathe without divine control. He was wrath, yes, but he was also answer. The skies, once serene under Zeus's dominion, blackened with every breath Typhon exhaled. He did not march toward Olympus. He ascended, climbing the world itself like a blasphemous mountain that had no right to exist. And with him came a terror unlike anything the cosmos had ever known. Storms screamed, rivers rebelled, stars hid behind the veils of night. Even the divine constellations trembled in their frozen orbits, as if afraid the monster might reach up and tear them down. The age of rule was ending. The age of reckoning had begun. Atop Mount Olympus, the throne room of the gods once echoed with laughter, strategy, and divine decree. But now was silent. The once immortal Olympians had scattered, fleeing to distant lands in mortal disguise. Apollo transformed into a hawk and soared into the east. Dionysus fled as a goat. Hermes became a wisp of wind. Even mighty Ares abandoned the battlefield, muttering oaths of vengeance he would never fulfill. Only Zeus, Athena, and Nike remained behind. The rest were gods in name only, ghosts dressed in fear. And Typhon, born of the earth's hatred and the void silence, approached not as a conqueror, but as an executioner. When he reached the base of Olympus, he raised both arms and tore the heavens open. The sky shattered into 1,000 streaks of red. Thunder no longer obeyed Zeus. It obeyed no one. Rain fell not as water, but as molten ash. The sacred olive trees around the mountain withered to dust. And from the sky, Typhon spoke, a voice deeper than the ocean trenches, filled with ancient vowels and deathless syllables. Zeus, you stole the world from your fathers. Now give it back. Zeus responded not with words, but with power. 1,000 lightning bolts screamed down from the vault of the firmament, each aimed to pierce Typhon's heart. But the monster laughed, not a joyous sound, but a rupture, a scream of wind and war. He caught the bolts midair, crushed them in his hands, and sent them spiraling back toward the mountain. The halls of Olympus cracked, the temples ignited. Statues of the gods, once symbols of might, crumbled into molten slag. Athena stood tall beside her father, her shield raised and eyes burning with battle wisdom. She knew this was not war. This was survival. Nike, the spirit of victory, circled them both, uncertain now whether triumph was even possible. Then Typhon climbed. He rose past the clouds, above the mountain's peak, and with a scream of winds and venom, tore through the gates of Olympus. The battle that followed was not witnessed by mortals. No bard ever sang of it in full. No scroll recorded the truth. But the earth remembers. The scars remain. Zeus and Typhon clashed in the highest skies, where air thins and even time hesitates. Zeus became pure lightning, his body a tempest of light and fury. Typhon countered with storms ripped from the beginning of time, dark cyclones of burning venom and howling flame. Every strike shook the planet. Every scream tore holes in the firmament. The moon wept silver blood. The oceans foamed with madness. At one moment, Zeus hurled a thunderbolt the size of a mountain, striking Typhon in the chest. The beast reeled, crashed into Mount Othrys, and shattered the remnants of Titan legacy there. But Typhon rose again, stronger, as if Olympus had only fed him. He grabbed Zeus in a web of serpentine limbs, dragged him through the storm, and slammed him into the earth with such force that the island of Sicily rose from the sea. The world held its breath. In the ruins of Olympus, silence reigned, dense and suffocating, broken only by the groans of the earth beneath Typhon's monstrous weight. The skies, once Zeus's dominion, now bent to Typhon's will. Lightning, once the king's scepter, danced in the beast's claws like tamed serpents, mockeries of the god they once served. Zeus had fallen, dragged across continents like a broken constellation. The Sky Father now lay buried in shadow. Typhon had not killed him, not yet. Death was too final, too merciful. What the monster wanted was surrender. And so, in the desolate shadows of Mount Hemus, Zeus was shackled. His sinews were torn, his tendons severed. His voice, once able to command the elements, was reduced to a hoarse whisper, echoing against cavern walls like fading thunder. Around his arms, Typhon bound chains forged from the bones of fallen titans, metal that remembered hatred, sharpened by betrayal. Around his legs, roots pulled from Tartarus floor held fast like iron serpents, pulsing with ancient venom. And over it all, a boulder, a mountain carved by Typhon's own claws, was pressed upon Zeus's chest, crushing not just his breath, but his reign. The world changed. With Olympus desecrated and Zeus imprisoned, the balance of nature cracked. Tides swelled without command, drowning cities in their slumber. Forests grew twisted and tangled, spreading into places once civilized. The sun lost its pattern. Sometimes it rose red, as if embarrassed. Sometimes it refused to rise at all. Mortals prayed, but their prayers fell like ashes from their lips. There were no gods to hear them. Even Hades, in his dark kingdom beneath the earth, dared not intervene. Poseidon retreated into the farthest trenches of the sea, silence gripping his voice. Hera wept in exile, mourning both a husband and a throne. Olympus had fallen not just in stone, but in soul. And above it all, Typhon stood, crowned not by fate, but by fury. But not all hope had fled. Among the gods, there stirred one who remembered courage not as glory, but as sacrifice. Hermes, the trickster, the swift, the unseen. In the chaos, he had disappeared, not out of fear, but to wait, to observe, to strike when all believed it was over. Disguised as a phantom wind, he slipped past Typhon's gaze, past the fractured palaces and burning altars, until he stood once more before the imprisoned king. Zeus, a titan reduced to flesh, looked up at his son. His eyes were hollow yet burning. In them, Hermes saw not despair, but defiance. "Are you here to run?" Zeus rasped. "No," Hermes replied. "I am here to steal back the sky." The plan was madness. But then, so was Typhon's birth. To unmake the beast, Hermes would need more than speed. He would need unity, the one thing the gods had always lacked. One by one, he summoned them, not as rulers, but as fugitives of fate. Athena from the ruins of Thebes, Hephaestus from the volcanic forges deep in the earth, Demeter hidden among failing harvests. Even Apollo, wrapped in grief, answered the call. The earth was not quiet. With Zeus unchained and the gods rising from the ashes of their shattered thrones, the heavens themselves convulsed. The air thickened with ancient tension, and deep in the veins of the world, something long buried stirred. The rhythm of old war, of divine blood, of fate reclaimed by fury. Typhon felt it. He did not fear it. He welcomed it. From his domain atop Mount Typhon, the malformed twin of Olympus, born from chaos and blackfire, Typhon summoned his children, the dread storm spirits. Born of smoke and ash, they swirled around him like shadows caught in a maelstrom. Lightning curled in his hair. Volcanoes bloomed at his feet. The winds were no longer free. They howled to his command. The time for mockery was over. The time for obliteration had begun. Zeus returned to the battlefield, not in grandeur, but in resolve. The storm god no longer wore the golden laurels of a king. He came wrapped in scars, wielding a jagged bolt ripped from the edge of the cosmos. Around him gathered the last loyal gods, the battered but unbroken. Athena, in blackened armor, her owl-eyed gaze fixed with fury. Poseidon, risen from the boiling deep, his trident now a spear of vengeance. Hermes, voice of the storm, his steps a blur of divine speed. Even Ares, drawn by the scent of inevitable blood, had returned, not for honor, but for battle. The Pantheon had become a warband, and before them towered Typhon, his 100 heads screaming in discord, his wings stretching wider than the horizon. He was not just a monster. He was a tempest given thought. The skies cracked. The two forces met not on land, but in the very firmament between worlds, where reality blurred and time lost meaning. Lightning rained not from clouds, but from wounds in the heavens. Sea and sky twisted into one violent spiral. Stars flickered and bled. Mountains lifted from the earth and shattered midair. It was not a war. It was annihilation given choreography. Zeus fought not like a god, but like a father reclaiming stolen sky. His bolts no longer gleamed, they screamed. They tore into Typhon's limbs, carving rents of white fire. Athena struck with words sharpened into blades of insight, cutting through Typhon's illusions. Poseidon cracked the very bones of the land beneath the beast's feet, and Hermes darted between the chaos, severing the sinews of Typhon's storm-crafted armor. Yet even so, the beast would not fall. Then came the wound. A moment, a sliver of exposed flesh beneath Typhon's main chest, where all his hearts converged. A weakness born not of design, but of arrogance. In that instant, Zeus called forth a final bolt, not forged by Cyclopes, but summoned from the original fire of creation, a fragment of the cosmos scream, older than even chaos. He hurled it. The bolt struck true. There was no roar, no final cry, only a silence so absolute it sucked the sound from existence. The battle had ended, but the earth had not healed. Where Typhon fell, the very bones of the world split. Mountains wept fire, forests blackened, rivers ran backward in terror. Though his form had been scattered, his essence remained, a festering wound beneath the skin of existence. The gods, weary and shaken, returned to Olympus not as victors, but as survivors. Their glory was dimmed, their laughter hollow. The sky they reclaimed was no longer pure. It carried a scar, unseen by mortals, but felt by every divine breath. Something had changed. The order they once believed eternal had been cracked open, revealing a truth far more terrifying than Typhon's strength. The gods were not untouchable. They were simply first to bleed. Below the world, beneath Tartarus and deeper still, there's a place unspoken in hymns and feared even by shadows. The mortals call it Erebus. The gods dare not name it. There, buried in a coffin of stone carved from the void itself, Typhon slumbered, not dead, not alive, dreaming. And in those dreams, the storm still raged. Every fragment of his being, the scattered wings, the bleeding eyes, the tongues that spoke fire, whispered to each other through cracks in reality. They remembered the taste of Olympus. They remembered the god's fear. Most of all, they remembered betrayal, not just by Zeus, but by the world that birthed him. In the silence of that abyss, something grew. Not a body, but a presence, a pressure, a terrible knowing that though Typhon was sealed, his essence seeped like ink into the veins of creation. Mortals called it madness. The gods called it prophecy. Signs began to spread. Children born with storm fire in their eyes. Animals behaving as though the sky itself whispered madness into their bones. Great temples, untouched for centuries, collapsed without cause. And the winds, those ancient messengers, began to speak in Typhon's many voices. Even the fates grew restless. Clotho's thread unraveled at random. Lachesis counted time backwards. Atropos' shears dulled against threads that refused to be cut. The pattern of destiny, the very tapestry of existence, twitched as if something writhed beneath it. Zeus watched from his throne, but he did not speak. Athena stared in her mirror of foresight and saw only storms. Poseidon no longer ruled the waves, for the oceans had become murmuring graves, and Hades, deep in his realm, felt something ancient pressing against the underworld gates, something even death could not bind. In time, whispers turned into cults. Men and women, driven mad by dreams they could not explain, began to worship not the gods, but the chaos beneath them. They spoke of a god who had no temples, only shadows. A god not of harvest or wisdom or war, but of return. They called him by many names, the sleeper, the maw, the forgotten crown, but in the end, all names meant the same thing. Typhon. He had become more than a beast. He had become an idea. And ideas, once born, do not die. One night, beneath a moon stained red once more, a tear formed in the sky. Not a portal, not a wound, a reminder. From within it echoed a voice, not loud, not wrathful, but patient. A whisper beneath all whispers. The gods built thrones atop graves. But graves do not forget. The light of Olympus flickered, and in that moment, even the immortals knew the war was not won. It was only paused. They thought silence meant safety, but beneath the stillness, something was listening. Typhon, sealed in the veins of the earth, had not vanished. His voice, subterranean and mythic, had found new echoes in the minds of mortals, in the guilt of gods, in the memory of the mountains that once bled at his feet. Though his form was scattered, his will was unified. And will is a weapon. From Erebus, where light goes to die, the whisper began. A subtle tremor beneath the bones of priests. A rustle in sacred scrolls never touched by wind. A chill in temples where fire had always burned. The whisper had no sound, only intent. It did not shout, it did not scream, it reminded. The sky you built sits on broken backs. The world turns because I am chained, but chains rust. And one day, on a morning when the sun rose half forgotten behind clouds that didn't move, the whisper cracked the edge of the world. It started as a low vibration. In Thebes, in Delphi, in Knossos, the ground did not shake its side. Statues wept, rivers boiled cold, birds flew backwards, and fish swam in the air. Prophets screamed and could not remember why. In the deepest chamber of Olympus, a chalice shattered though no hand touched it. The gods gathered. Zeus held his thunderbolt, but it felt lighter now, as if the weight of what was coming could not be fought with lightning. Athena opened her war scrolls, but the pages bled black ink. Hades felt the underworld tremble and realized even death itself was afraid. They turned their eyes downward, past the crust of creation, past the prisons they built, down into the darkness where Typhon slept. But he no longer slept. He had learned patience. When he returned, it was not in fire. It was not in screams. It was an awakening. The mortals did not panic. They rejoiced. They welcomed the storm, not because they understood it, but because they remembered what the gods had forgotten. Fear is honest. And in a world shaped by pride and polished myths, honesty was sacred. Typhon walked again, not as a beast, not as vengeance, but as a reminder that even the heavens must answer for the wounds they bury. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence unmade illusions. Temples fell. Thrones turned to dust. The sun dimmed, not from his wrath, but because it bowed. And in that long, final silence, the gods realized the truth that had always stalked their power. There is no crown that does not rest on bones. The world did not end. It simply changed. Some say Typhon tore down Olympus. Others claim he rebuilt it in his image, raw, trembling, honest. Some say he vanished again into the core of the earth, satisfied not with revenge, but with remembrance. For myths do not die. They rot, they sleep, and they rise when we forget why we feared them. And so, even now, in the quiet places of the earth, in forgotten caves, in the hush before thunder, in the pause before truth, he waits.